Today is Tuesday, July 14th, 2026, and today is National Tape Measure Day, which is a holiday dedicated to proving that no project in history has ever been completed without at least one person saying, "That can't be right. Measure it again." And after digging through today's stories, I realize they're all about measuring something. The size of a revolution, the scale of human innovation, and eventually, how much music could fit in your pocket. Welcome to Wait, That's Random, This Day in History. I'm C.L. Burns, voice actor, audiobook narrator, and your reasonably calm guide through humanity's long history of strange decisions. On July 14, 1789, an angry crowd stormed the Bastille in Paris. It's one of the defining moments of the French Revolution, and it's also one of the most misunderstood. If you imagine hundreds of desperate prisoners pouring out of its gates, you're not alone. But when the Bastille fell, there were only 7 prisoners inside. 4 were forgers, 2 had been declared mentally ill, and 1 was a nobleman imprisoned at his family's request. So if hardly anyone was being rescued, why was this moment echoed through history? Because the Bastille wasn't just a prison, it was a symbol. For generations, it had represented the absolute authority of the French monarchy. The king could imprison people there through a royal order known as lettre de cachet, often without a public trial. The people weren't simply attacking a building. They were attacking what it represented. Sometimes symbols become more powerful than bricks and mortar. The fall of the Bastille told France, and eventually the rest of the world, that ordinary people believed the old system could be challenged. It's fascinating that one of history's most famous prison breaks was never really about the prisoners. Our next story is another reminder that people have always been fascinated by the future. Sometimes they even build entire events around it. On July 14, 1853, the United States opened its first major World's Fair in New York City. If you've ever walked through a modern technology expo, imagine that. Only instead of the latest smartphones or electric cars, people were seeing inventions they had never dreamed possible. The exhibition of the industry of all nations brought together innovations from around the world. Visitors wandered through exhibits featuring machinery, manufacturing, art, scientific discoveries, and products from dozens of countries. For many Americans, it was the first time they had ever seen so many international ideas gathered under one roof. The centerpiece was an enormous crystal-inspired exhibition building that echoed London's famous Crystal Palace. To visitors, it must have felt like stepping into tomorrow. I've always loved World's Fairs because they capture something uniquely human. Every generation believes it's living at the edge of the future. Then the next generation comes along, looks at those same inventions, and calls them history. Speaking of things that quietly change the future, our final story probably lives in your pocket, even if you don't realize it. On July 14, 1995, the audio format we know as MP3 officially received its name. 3 simple letters. That's all. At the time, almost nobody outside the technology world paid much attention. But those 3 letters would quietly change the way billions of people listen to music, and eventually podcasts and audiobooks. Before MP3, digital audio files were enormous. Storing just a handful of songs could fill a computer's hard drive. Sharing music over the internet was painfully slow. Then came a new compression method that dramatically reduced file sizes while keeping the sound good enough for most listeners. Suddenly, hundreds of songs could fit where only a few had before. Portable music players became practical. Digital music libraries exploded. And eventually, streaming services changed the entire industry once again. As someone who narrates audiobooks and produces a daily podcast, it's hard for me to overstate how much digital audio transformed this kind of work. Today, people can carry thousands of songs, dozens of audiobooks, and hundreds of podcast episodes in a device that fits in their pocket. It's easy to take that for granted. But it all traces back to moments like this one. Sometimes history changes because of a dramatic revolution. Sometimes it's just 3 letters. And looking back across today's stories, they all found different ways to measure progress. A revolution measured by the fall of a prison. Innovation measured by the inventions on display at a World's Fair. And technology measured by how much sound could fit in an impossibly small file. And that brings us to someone who spent their career measuring something much harder to quantify: human nature. Born on July 14, 1918, Ingmar Bergman became one of the most influential filmmakers in cinema history. Even if you've never seen one of his films, there's a good chance you've watched directors who were inspired by him. Bergman wasn't known for spectacular action scenes or elaborate special effects. He was fascinated by people, their fears, their relationships, their doubts, their search for meaning. Films like The Seventh Seal, Wild Strawberries, and Persona explored questions that many movies avoided. What makes life meaningful? How do we deal with loss? What does it mean to really know another person? His work influenced generations of filmmakers, including Martin Scorsese, Woody Allen, and Christopher Nolan. One thing I admire about Bergman is that he trusted audiences to think. He didn't always provide easy answers. Sometimes he simply asked better questions. And looking back across today's stories, I kept coming back to the idea that progress isn't always easy to measure. Sometimes it looks like a crowd standing up to a symbol of power. Sometimes it's thousands of people walking through a building filled with inventions from around the world. Sometimes it's 3 letters that quietly reshape the way we experience music, audiobooks, and podcasts. And sometimes it's a filmmaker reminding us that the biggest questions don't always have simple answers. Anyway, that's what July 14th measured for me. And before I go, here's today's oddly appropriate quote. The important thing is not to stop questioning. Albert Einstein. If you'd like to explore more of my work, books, narration, or ongoing historical curiosity, you can find it all at waitthat'srandom.com. I'm C.L. Burns, and I'm glad you were here for this one. I'll see you tomorrow.